Hello everyone, Burb here. Today I'm going to talk about UmaStan and pace down mode. This is a much requested topic because I believe the early race in UmaMusume is very unclear. Now, this is going to be a two-part lecture, not because I'm not going to completely talk about UmaStan and PDM. I'm going to bring these topics to their completion in this video. However, there is another topic that this becomes core knowledge required to understand that topic in the next section of this lecture. So this is why this is a series. We are going to completely talk about UmaStan, we're going to completely talk about PDM, and that will lead into part 2. So look forward to that. I hope I have time to record that before my vacation. But the other disclaimer is that the early race is very weird. It is almost impossible to model because it depends on things outside of your personal control. And while people have attempted, I'm not 100% convinced even the simulators get it right all the time. But I am taking this from my experience in actual races, as well as in the simulator, as well as me consulting other people more knowledgeable than I. So I'm going to do my best attempt. There could be issues in this video. There could be misinformation, I suppose. But I have done my best to explain how UmaStan works, why it's so good, and why it is an option in the early race for multiple roles in multiple tracks. So let's talk about pace down mode, which is the backbone of this entire early race. Pace down mode is, for backliners, sadness. However, realistically, what pace down mode is, it deals with the position keep section of the race. The position keep section of the race is not the early race, which is the yellow section. The position keep is everything up to this dark blue little go sign, which I believe is a VCR play button. But this position keep section is the first 10 sectors of the race, which I believe it splits into 24, if I remember, but it's always the first same percentage of the race. Now, in these first 10 sections, Umas attempt to maintain their style group, which means that it gives some sort of consistency in the positioning of different Umas based on which role that you have chosen. It's the backbone of balance on this game. Essentially, if you are, let's say, a pace chaser with a front runner in front of you, you are the style behind the front runners. Now, the only thing that matters currently in the game that at least the wiki provides is that the lead horse is what dictates the pace of the race. So you don't care what every other horse except for the first place horse, the horse in the lead, is doing. If you're a pace chaser and you get too close to the lead horse, you summon the UmaMusume police and they bestow upon you pace down mode. What does pace down mode do? It basically tells you you need to go back to your position, and it basically kills your speed until you get to a random point within your position group section. We'll talk about that in a bit. There is something called pace up mode, which is a similar situation, which is sort of just a bonus topic, maybe for a different video. But if you are too far away from the leader in your position group, if you succeed a wit check, you can figure out you're too far away from the leader and instead increase your target speed until you reach your section of the style group. So this is a small chance. It's 31% at max wit and 28.5% chance at 800 wit. I believe it checks every second, but I could be wrong. But that is the chance that your Uma is smart enough to figure out, hey, I need to gain some speed to get back into my own position. And pace up mode will eventually return you to the normalcy of where you're supposed to be in your situation. Let's talk about PDM again. So PDM, pace down mode, which is the bad version, is saying, hey, you have gotten too close, so your target speed is going to be basically removed by 8.5% in the early race and 6.5% or 5.5% in the mid race, which is devastating. You have seen this in your races. You have a pace chaser going really strong, getting really close to the front runner pack, and then all of a sudden they just feel like they die and they go back past, even if you're unlucky, past the entire pack that there is. These thresholds actually are in the game as an equation. So all it is the pace chaser. The front obviously don't have any PDM. That's their advantage. The pace chasers are anywhere from 3 meters to 5 meters times the course factor. Lates go from 6.5x to 7x, ends to 7.5x to 8x. Course factor, all it is 0.0008 times the course length minus 1,000 meters plus 1. So you take the course length minus 1,000, that is your multiplier of that 0.00008, and you add 1. So essentially, the longer the course length, the more distance between them. But as you can see, because the course length is subtracted by 1,000, longer tracks do not have a completely one-to-one spread from shorter tracks, and that is a lot of times why the backliners have a slight advantage on those long tracks, is because the course length is very long, but then the PDM is not as high as it was before. So this is a CM adjacent video, so the current CM that's probably coming out at this point is the Nakayama 2000 meter, which means that if we take our equation, 2000 minus 1000 is 1000 times 0.00008. You take 1000 and 8, you move it over 3 places, so it's 0.8. 0.8 plus 1 means our course factor is 1.8 range for each style, which means pace chasers will sit between the 3 meter to 9 meter mark, which is about 1 to 3 horse lengths. The lates will be 11.7 to 12.6, and ends will be 13.5 meters to 14.4 meters. If you're noticing something, a visual representation of where the pace chasers, the lacers, and the end closers should be in comparison to the lead horse is, well, it's very clustered for backliners, if you haven't noticed. And the reason why it's very suggested on backliners isn't necessarily because they need to make up more ground. I mean, it's good on a pace chaser, but it's because it's super clustered. That's my personal opinion. When you're very clustered, what happens? You get blocked. And when you're blocked, you are sad. But more importantly, being in front of your roll means that you basically can't get blocked by your roll, right? And even in the early race, you've seen this before, in the early race, if you are behind a bunch of other horses of your roll and you proc a mid-race skill and you are unable to pass people, that mid-race skill is effectively wasted because you basically run right into the horse in front of you and bounce off of them because you are blocked. So you do not want to be blocked while your mid-race skills are proccing, which means you want to be in front of your roll at the very least, even in front of other rolls, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Mid-race skills are less likely to be blocked and get value when you're in front of your roll because you have space in front of you to go. So how do we make sure we are in the front of our own position pack? Well, PDM braking, or pace down mode braking. Some of you already know how to do this, but PDM braking essentially means when you are actively in pace down mode and you proc any velocity skill, PDM is immediately canceled. You cannot be in PDM when you have a target speed or current speed skill, which basically means any velocity skill, active. So, any straight skill, any corner skill, technically, if it can proc in the early race, can be a PDM breaker if PDM is going on. What happens is immediately you start getting your target speed up to normal plus whatever the skill gives you. So you do get some boost with it. You basically keep going up to to the higher target speed. And sometimes it even lets you pass rolls that you are in front of. This could be a late starter to a pace chaser. It could technically be a end closer to a pace chaser or a front runner. We've seen gold chips in second place. Everyone knows this too. But PDM, once the skill ends up, you can also just get PDM'd again. And this is where it's random because sometimes it decides to do it and sometimes it doesn't do it immediately for some reason. But either way, you likely are getting PDM'd again. And sometimes this PDM causes you to drag whoever was in behind you back with you. This is known as kidnapping. So you can just kidnap other Umas by PDM braking in front of them and having the game decide to PDM you afterwards. And sometimes that has happened to you, and it's very, very unfortunate. I find that kidnapping happens most often when you PDM break early using a skill, right? And then we get onto a corner because all the initial gates are going in a very spread out pack, and then we are all attempting to go and take our position in the corner. And sometimes you UmaStan early, you get into your position, and then the game decides you're too far forward, and you PDM and drag the entire pack, or at least a couple, whoever's on that inner rail, with you. I think that's the most common occurrence of kidnapping that occurs. So that's where the PDM would hit in that case. PDM technically can happen anytime up to the position keep ends. However, there really are two situations where a PDM breaker has a guaranteed value. The first is simple to understand. It's, PDM is based purely because this is, like I said, it's random, but it's based off of things. Sorry, let's continue. PDM is based off of strength of the lead horse in particular, which you cannot control unless you are that lead horse. That is the basis behind chariot mode, I believe. I'm not 100% sure all the benefits of chariot mode, but I'm pretty sure it's just if you build a strong front runner that gets the lead, that means you are guaranteed that your late surgers and end closers do not have to deal with all this early race shenanigans as much, because usually a bad lead pack is what causes PDMing over and over and over again. I'm sure there's plenty of other things that chariot mode exists and have gotten wrong. That's why I was kind of waffling a bit, because I don't know 100% with that. However, I was saying guaranteed value. Two places where you have guaranteed value no matter where the lead pack is doing, no matter what other horses are doing. The first one is if you proc a skill that exits the position keep, you will basically get the value of that skill. And if you randomly are just in PDM from a bad front runner, like front runner leader, you will cancel PDM and you will high roll into something that gives you a very, very, very high advantage as well. So take a look at it when you're picking skills. Stuff like the Nakayama 2000, you can see it's a corner track on the acceleration for speed carryover, but also it's a corner track going exiting the position keep. So while you can't really rely on it because, PDM is so complex in the early game and you can't control it, hypothetically, you can cancel it down and you maintain all the advantage that you have exiting the position keep at that point. The second time, in the second place, and the primary place that we're going to talk about in this video, is the first sector right at the start by the gate. There is a guaranteed pace down mode at the start of the race because obviously, when you're in the gate, you are even with the front runner who is chosen as the leader. This is scripted as well, I'm pretty sure. But this position, this PDM in the first sector happens all the time exactly for the first sector. Now, this first sector can be broken with a specific skill known as UmaStan, and of course, SuperStan if you are Agnes Digital. If you look here on the graph, when that happens, you break your PDM mode early. When you break your PDM mode early, you go to your actual race target speed before everybody else. So if you don't PDM break and someone who does PDM break, you notice how there is area under the curve here, or the integral of it. There is space here. That is just simply lengths gained. At the very best, you maintain those lengths through the entirety of the mid-race. At the very worst, you're in front of every single non-UmaStan character if UmaStan is able to proc in this first sector, and it's very important. UmaStan is near guaranteed to proc as soon as possible because at the start of the race, through the first sector, everyone is coming out with the same pace down mode as well as being and starting from the same position, which means it's very, very likely that the person to your left and to your right in gate are close enough to proc the condition, which is just there's enough Umas around you. So UmaStan gives you both the target speed increase, which is just the base skill itself, as well as what I like to call an early start bonus of lengths. And that early start bonus of lengths can be maintained for the race in some situations if you have a very strong front runner pack leader. And it also gives you an advantage over everybody that does not have this skill. And that's why it's so good in certain maps. Water break. Okay. However, PDM is not always broken by UmaStan. There is a 5-second delay to UmaStan, and this is why it's very important and why it doesn't work on every single map. Okay, UmaStan has a 5-second delay. What does that 5-second delay translate to? It depends on the map. You see, at 1,000 meter, which is the shortest sprint we have available, I believe, it procs midway through almost Sector 3, like 3/4 of the way through Sector 2 into Sector 3. This is much too late to get the guaranteed pace down mode. Okay, so the guaranteed pace down mode will not be hit by UmaStan. At 3,600 meter, which is the stair stakes, the longest race we have, if you look here, it procs halfway through Sector 1 and continues moving on until it ends. And the thing is that you have a 73 meter advantage where you are just gaining speed over and over again till everyone else, so it has a ton of value. At the 2,000 meter Nakayama, it's roughly at the threshold. You see it procs at roughly 83 81 meters, sorry, and the sector 1 ends at 83 meters when the PDM ends. So you're getting 2 meters of value, which is practically nothing. And the big thing is that the 2 meters of value means you're going a little bit faster than everyone else, but it's not like enough of a horse length for the game to decide that you have essentially completed an overtake. So 2,000 meters is kind of that threshold to where UmaStan stops giving that early start advantage. So you still get the target speed. And I want to say this, and I will say this in a bit. I believe I say it in a second. Yep. Okay. So you still get the target speed for UmaStan and SuperStan. You do not get an early start advantage because the PDM happens after the UmaStan procs after the PDM release. So it is just a speed skill at this point. If it is 2,200 meters or longer, you do get an early start bonus, essentially, where you have area under this curve where you will gain lengths over everyone else, enough for the game to consider that you have at least an advantage in vying for position on the first corner, really. That's really the use of it. This is good. It's very, very, very good. And as the track length increases, your advantage with UmaStan also increases as well. And you're going to notice, like you noticed in the Pisces Cup, the characters with UmaStan were just in front of everybody for quite a while before they started getting settled in the pack. At 2,000 meters, like I said, I know I ordered this wrong, UmaStan is just an early race speed skill. But just an early race speed skill is still a very, very good skill because early race speed skills are very, very rare. If you can still help, it can still help you get early position because you are still gaining the lengths that UmaStan gives you. It's just it doesn't give you more value than technically any other white skill. However, there aren't many, if any, guaranteed early race speed skills in the game that are kind of universal in these shorter tracks. Pretty sure Mile may even, I think that maybe Excel, but that may be one. But straight skills can proc in the early race, the mid race, and the late race. If you start on a corner, corner skills can proc in any 4 corners. There's no way to guarantee your early race position unless you pick early race skills, and UmaStan is just one of those options. That is why at 2,200 meters or more, it is highly suggested to get it. In those 3,200 tracks, it's almost required for backliners. And in the 2,000 meter or less, it's not necessarily even mentioned by a lot of people. But I will attest, I still think it's a very good skill to pick up if it does show up on your run in those 2,000 meter and shorter classes. So this is not the only way to influence the early game. As if you know, there's something that's came up in pretty recently in a certain paper, and I will talk about it in the next video because there is some problems with that way and that method of gaining lengths in the early game to vie for position. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed at least this first part of the early race. I will attempt to record the second part. I'm trying not to leave you on a cliffhanger, but I think it just adds a little bit more drama, and if I record it, it'll probably be out tomorrow on the schedule. So this has been UmaStan. I hope I did it justice. I'm sure there's a lot of opinions in the comments. I will at least attempt to add the corrections for those people I know what they're saying is correct. So I hope I've at least made you all think about how UmaStan is good, especially on longer tracks. All right? Take care, everyone. Burr out.